Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justformorefix.com or on Twitter at justformorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you can give us a rating and review at iTunes, wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to have Gaming Roundtable number 10. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
I'm Willie D. Nelson from All Things Good and Nerdy, a pop culture podcast, part of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other tantalizingly geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to Just More Fix. Well, I think we only have one announcement today before we get things rolling today, so...
What?
Well, I guess two, technically. I'm going to kind of make it 2.5. So we are happy to announce that we've been doing indie RPG days at our local game store in Terre Haute for several months now. And I think we calculated it up. We ran over 20 different independent small press games, and with really great success and good turnout and stuff like that. And so we're really proud and happy that we did that. And the whole goal was to grow indie gaming in our own local community, because we sit here and we talk about games, and that's all good, and we're really happy to do it. But if you really want to make a difference, you sort of have to get out there and actually do something and run games for people and show people that there are more games out there besides D&D and Pathfinder, right? We've been doing that for a while and had pretty good success at it, and it actually prompted our game store to sort of host their own that runs, I believe, every other week now. And so we're sort of turning the reins over. And because there are enough people to sort of keep it going under its own weight now, and we're still going to show up and run some games here and there depending on how our schedule works out. But it's really cool to see that we set a goal to do something, and we accomplished it. And there are loads of small press games and like PBTA and Fate and all different kinds of stuff, Dungeon Crawl Classics, OSR stuff, all kinds of games being ran. And it's just really awesome to see that and know that we sort of had a small hand in helping things grow that way. So because of that, we're kind of letting the reins go a little bit and sort of letting that grow and become its own thing. And we're going to, like I had said, we're going to sort of step in and do some GMing here and there. But I think we're going to sort of shift gears a little bit, and we're maybe starting like a small proto spiel at our game store, because why not? I need something else to do. And it's another great place for us to playtest our zines that we're producing and playtest Troubadours, as well as anybody else that's interested, because in southwestern Indiana, as far as I know, I don't believe that there is a proto spiel out here. So if you are in the sort of Midwest area and have games to playtest and that kind of stuff, we're not exactly sure how it's going to look or how often it's going to be, depending on interest. But we are going to try and work to put together some sort of proto-spiel thing that I think is probably going to be more RPG focused. But we're open to board games as well, because I think nearly everyone that comes to our games, at least, are big board gamers as well, and are happy to sit in and try and figure some things out. So
there's a lot of crossover, at least on the RPG player end. Yeah,
absolutely. There's not every board gamer is an RPGer, but most RPGers I feel like are sort of
at least dabble in board games too.
Right. We're missing a couple people. Let's play a board game. Like we'll bust out Catan or whatever it is. So, but we're super happy to announce that, and it hasn't really kind of become a solidified thing yet, but it's definitely on the way, and it'll be cool and awesome to do. So, along with that, I would encourage any of you out there listening to us that if you want to see indie games grow or small press games grow, just do exactly what we did. Go run games and have a good time. And I think you'll be surprised at how many people there are that want to sort of try these games out and take them for a test drive and see how they work, because it is kind of a big hump if you only came from a more traditional RPG background of like D&D and Pathfinder and stuff. Making the jump to PBTA or something that's even a little more story based and narrative, like Itris B or something, it can be an even bigger hurdle. And the way you sort of overcome that is by someone sort of showing you the ways and giving you the courage to sort of just try it out. And I think you'll have a great time. 2, it makes you a much better game master because it challenges you to run for people you don't know necessarily, which is sort of stressful in its own way. But also, I think it it improves your improvisation abilities and learning to adapt to new players, which is always good. And then if you want to go run games at a con, which I believe every con has a shortage of game masters, it makes that process much, much easier. So I guess we would just encourage you to take the plunge and see how it goes and, run a couple 3 months, once a month, and see what happens, because sometimes the first couple months it's hard to get things going, but as we found out, but it grew legs and is its own thing now. So we're super happy for that. Second announcement is, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know about HillCon, and we are having another HillCon, as we do every year. HillCon is our sort of local, what do I want to say that? It is a convention that we run at our house for our friends because we have a large group of gaming friends, and it's hard to make time for everyone to get together. So once a year, we set a date. Usually 3 days. It's the best 3 days of gaming in Vermilion County, Indiana. And we have everybody come over and we have good food and good times and drinks and games and just loads and loads of fun.
It's like the highlight of the year.
It really is. I mean, like Gen Con is great, but HillCon is just so much fun and it's relaxed and we do loads of gaming and it's a great time. So life is busy and it's hard to coordinate those schedules together, but I would just say that every year we have done it, we've been super happy. So make time for yourselves, make time for your friends, get together, play some great games, have some good food, have some good drinks, or however it is that you choose to relax, and just take a minute to sort of enjoy yourselves, basically, right? Everybody's so busy doing everything, and I just can't encourage everyone out there enough to just sort of just take a break and just have fun and play games, right? We're running ours from November 1st to November 3rd, and there may be some more announcements that are going to come out with that. We may be doing some additional promotional stuff through the podcast and whatnot. So stay tuned because we'll make those announcements as well. But just super excited and want to encourage everyone else out there to just go play games, do more, right? All right, so we're going to just go right into this today. We're going to have another gaming roundtable. It's been since May, I think, since we've had our last one, so we thought it would just be fun to sort of sit down and geek out about some of the games and things that we're doing that we've had a good time with. So do you want to start, or do you want me to start, or?
So I've got a couple of things just to mention that I saw on Kickstarter that were cool.
Okay.
So first of all, they're redoing Fiasco.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That looks really cool.
Project. So Bully Pulpit Games, it actually closes in less than 2 weeks, so it'll probably be after this comes out. No, this will drop this Wednesday, so it should be up. You maybe have 7 to 10 days to back it if you're still interested. So no, I think he's only got 9 days left.
Oh, well, check Kickstarter. That's all I can say.
Anyways, so they're redoing it. And before you would have to get the index cards. There was a bunch of dice you would have to get together, various colors, and try and work that out. They've kind of gotten rid of all of that and replaced it with playing cards that come contained and ready to go. It's kind of like a box set deal. Yeah, it's almost somewhere between a board game and an RPG, which Fiasco always kind of was, But I feel like this is a great bridge between board games and RPGs. You can really actually point to it now. I mean, it's definitely a storytelling game, Fiasco. Oh, right. But yeah, it's good fun, and it's kind of like one of the original GM-less games, right? Oh, yeah. I think it also does a great job of, there are 2 Rooms and a Boom, right? That's a good party game. And there's a certain amount of bluffing and whatnot that goes along with that, and it's kind of getting close, but it's not quite there yet. Whereas Fiasco, I feel really truly sits with one foot on each side, and with the new update to it and all these cards and components for people that aren't accustomed to RPGs, maybe you're ready to play that game out of the box, and it's got all the suggestions for you, for different relationships and all that kind of stuff. And I think it looks really cool. And it's a great way to introduce some people that may not be role playing gamers right into the game. So the other thing that kind of caught my eye was, you remember the Swords Fall RPG that came out not that long ago? It was Afrofuturism, and the art on it was really lovely. I didn't back the RPG, but it was it was a setting book. It wasn't a contained system, but it was kind of open source setting book for RPG. Okay. Anyways, they are releasing, they already released, I don't know, words. I don't know if it was a Kickstarter or not, but point being, they have a graphic novel. Oh, right on. Set in that universe. And since the art was really good for the game, I'm assuming that, graphic novel makes a lot of sense. And I always think it's cool. It kind of gives you a more accessible way to interact with this great big world. So if you were kind of on the fence about the Swords Fall setting
then you could check this out. And if you find the graphic novel appealing, then maybe you could, go on and end up checking out the
Who's
the
printing the
RPG.
graphic novel?
Give me 1 second.
It's
called Drift of Dreams, and
Okay.
you can pre-order it now on Kickstarter. So, I don't know, it just says a Swordsfall graphic novel created by Brandon Dixon. That's all it says.
Brandon Dixon is the name of the... Is that an artist or is that the author?
That is who published it on Kickstarter, from what I can tell.
Well-
I haven't delved into it too much. I just was, kind of passing through, and I was like, oh, the art for this was really
Is this
cool.
a science
So-
fiction kind of thing?
Yeah.
Like an African,
It's,
kind of a hip hop kind of a thing, if I remember right. It's like, I remember vaguely.
Afrofuturism.
Right, yeah. Right on. That's cool. Kind of like an Axiom Punk in space, maybe a little bit. Like, that'd be kind of a cool... Man, that could be really cool.
It reminded me more of a sort of a post-apocalyptic kind
Yeah.
of setting as opposed to
Right.
like tech cyberpunk.
Right,
It was a little more like notes of like Numenera to me.
Oh, okay.
than,
Like, okay, so a
the
little more...
world is a little less established
Right.
than with your, like Ready Player One kind of setting
Right,
where you
okay.
still have a, it's kind of shitty and run down, but there's still a lot of infrastructure. This seemed
Okay.
like less of that. Cool. But again, I didn't delve too deeply. I just remember, like, at the time I was broke, but I was like, oh, the art for this is really nice.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right on. Well, it's so eye-grabbing sometimes. Like, that's where what really
And it was different.
draws you in. Yeah. We talk so much about art grabbing the eye and not being cookie-cutter, sort of boring fantasy art. You know what I'm saying? So much. So I get it. Totally get it. So...
So that's what I'm starting out with. Kickstarter, interesting, fiddly bits.
Right on. Right on. Segueing away, or I guess with Kickstarter along, we did a Zine Quest episode quite some time ago now because Zine Quest happened, and it was amazing and awesome. And I think I have nearly all of the zines that we kickstarted. I'm short 2, but they are both at one is in the mail and on its way here, which is the Demon Collective Volume 1. And the second one is Tomb of the Black Sands from Swordfish Islands, and they got the artwork. It's kind of have a mock-up of it, and it's basically done, and I believe it's in the printing process now, so it should be on its way, anytime, and it's been really, really cool. So Zine Quest was amazing, and I'm super... overall, I am super happy with it. I backed... I don't even know how many. It became kind of absurd at a certain point, and these are the ones that I backed at the physical copy level. There were several that I have PDFs of that I didn't do the actual...
There's so many. I feel like there's more looking at them than I was aware of
Yeah.
what's happening.
Oh, no, I guess there's a couple other ones we didn't get
No,
yet.
we didn't get the one with the half beastie creatures yet, right?
No, I've got that one. I
Okay,
got that one.
there's
This
a
PDF, I think.
PDF one,
Yeah.
okay.
We don't have the chains of the. I can't remember how you say the word, but it's the dwarven one where you're
Yes.
chain. We don't. That one hasn't came yet, and then the canals one. I'm still. I think I've got the PDF of that, but so. Overall, I'm super excited, and I had a great time backing them and watching the production cycle of them, and such a great time, in fact, that it actually inspired us to sort of get off of our butts and sort of enter the zine space.
Yeah, now we're almost 2 zines deep.
Yes, correct. And so just some highlights for me that I noticed is one is Casket Land. As far as the physical printing of the zine goes, I'm just super, super happy with it. Like the sort of like moleskin cover, and it's got this really kind of interesting, trippy world. And I believe it's getting developed into a larger PBTA game that's going to be something like 100 or 200 page perfect bound book. So I'm super excited for that because it's by Marie Anger.
And we learned how to say her name right since
True.
the last time. So
Yeah, and we met her at Gen Con. She was there at one of the booths and talked to her about some artwork and stuff that she's doing and whatnot. And it's just a really, really cool zine. The other one is another.
Well, and it ended up coming with a cloth map.
Oh, yeah,
that
like-
is phenomenal.
Right. Yeah, and it's got the cutest darn little GM screen I ever did see. It's like 6 inches tall and about, I don't know, 14 inches wide maybe or something like that. It's just fun. It's got it's really interesting to see the zine ethos go into other gaming products. So you have the zine and it's all small and compact, and then you have the little GM screen that goes with it and the map. I just thought it's really, really cool and fun. It's very cool to see people go the extra mile to sort of create that extra stuff. That's really awesome. So the other one that I really find intriguing is Girl Underground, and we haven't ran it yet, but it's sort of that labyrinth
Alice in Wonderland kind of a thing. I've got all the playbooks printed and we're ready to go. And I really like this bright green cover that it has, and it's really cool. I'm excited to give it a try. We haven't done it yet, but
I guess like probably we should split these up so that there's a better chance we end up using all of them.
what do you mean?
I mean, there's like 12 zines here.
Oh, yeah.
The odds of you running all 12 of these in the next year, like, that's a pretty daunting task.
Yo, yeah.
Like, like, I could take some, you could take some.
Oh, right on. Yeah, no, I'm all about that. Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I want to play all of these because they're so cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's why we backed them.
Right.
I mean, some of them, to be fair, are not like games. Like, the RPG design one is...
Yeah, that Nathan Palettas is right here. That's right
two
here.
of them, or 2 or 3 of them are Mothership content, right?
Yeah.
So... But yeah, anyway.
Yep. So, and then you mentioned Mothership, and Mothership is just amazing. And just to geek out for a minute about Mothership is that it's such a really cool thing to see like a complete RPG put together in something so small. Do you know what I mean? And like it is a 100% complete RPG that's rock solid and is really cool. It's just interesting to see that there are lots of people out there sort of like challenging the normal notions of what it is to produce an RPG product. And you have something, I think at Gen Con, I'm not sure what it is if you buy it directly from them, but at Gen Con it was $15. And it's a complete thing, and it's really, really cool to see.
It's way worth, I mean,
oh, yeah.
Even if it was more than $15, like it's a...
Right, so if you want to run a game that's like...
Easily playable and very replayable.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Like it's just great.
So that's been really cool, and I really had a good time following all the creators doing that thing, and I really, really hope that there's another Cincoest that comes around that sort of has the same momentum behind it, because it's just really cool to see, and it's not a huge investment for people that are, there's always this concern about Kickstarter about whether you're going to get the product or not, but being that it's a zine, it's usually not a huge financial investment, so it's not like $40 or $60 for this hardback giant book.
Actually, so far, only been burned once. Mm-hmm. I've had some things take significantly longer than originally intended. In fact, there's one I'm still waiting on, but I feel confident it will happen eventually.
Right.
There's really only one thing where I'm like, oh, that didn't happen, and I'm a little upset about that. Mm-hmm. It's been on the Twitter circles and stuff, at least it passed with that Witch Mountain one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All things considered, not too bad, really.
Right. So, do you have anything else to mention about zines real quick, or from all of this, or?
About zines? No.
Should move on to the next thing to geek out about a little bit.
Yes, I think. I was remembering back to, you remember I downloaded Kyle's carousing table?
Yeah.
For 5e.
I think that's actually not his. It's on the Virgin Bat website, but if I remember correctly.
Sorry, his friend had made that. That's my bad.
It's,
So, but it's on Birch and Bat. It's a free PDF download of a carousing table for 5e, and it's got quite a lot of content there. But I was trying to think. So we were playing Night Witches last night, and I had recommended that when an NPC is introduced, we start off knowing one rumor about them that's circulating around camp, because that's how life works, right? And that kind of colors the reaction a little bit differently and gives us something to grab a hold of as far as interacting with that NPC goes. And I was trying to think, like, if there was something already in existence that would be easily switched over for that setting. So I hadn't really had a chance to go back and look at it. I'm not sure that will work, but that was just one of the things that I had thought of. Because I know there are other places where I have seen random rumor charts and things of that nature, particularly with OSR products.
Right.
I'm certain that 100% that I have encountered one before. I just cannot remember exactly where. And I'm kind of always of the feeling... I don't want to make something from scratch if somebody else has already done that work for me.
Right. Oh, yeah. It makes things a lot easier. That's for sure.
Or even, made it for me to the point where it can be easily adapted in less time than it would take me to make my own thing. But we kind of, we picked it up in a pinch, and every person around the table contributed a potential rumor, and then we just rolled randomly out of that bank of like 6 to pick one for the person.
Well, it sort of made things a real easy, because everyone got to put their own little sort of spin and flavor on things, and I think that was kind of a cool way to do it, because that way there's always a chance that whatever the thing is that you think might be interesting to see put in the game
has a chance to sort of come out, right? And
And I like the idea of it being a rumor too, because it's not a truth.
right, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like as the GM, you can decide whether it's true or not. But that's just what everyone thinks is going on.
Arella, that's the name. I was like, it's right there. It starts with an A. So that's by Arella from Birch and Bat Studios, and you can find that at birchandbat.com, I think. So it's really awesome. It's a really cool tool to use. It's got a lot of...
For a free download,
Yeah.
like it's substantial.
oh, yeah. Around. So you mentioned Night Witches, and we talked a lot after we just finished recording our last Night Witches session, not episode, but like session number 10. And we started talking about how we realized that game is probably kind of coming to a close in about 4 or 5 more sessions, right? And it made me realize, one, how much I really, really like that game, but two, I've always sort of thought as Powered by the Apocalypse games as sort of like these great games to use as one-shots because they get off the ground really fast and do all of that heavy lifting and sort of build backstory into things really well. But when we played Monster Hearts, and I think we were about like 5 sessions in, I began to realize how entangled things got and when the game really begins to shine, right? Mm-hmm. And then we just finished session number 10, and I feel like between session 7 and session 10, the game really, really has grown long legs and has sort of become its own monster that you really got to kind of wrestle with, right? And it was just an interesting moment, because I've said it a few times where I feel like that PBTA games are good mid-length games, you know?
Yeah.
But
some of them especially the ones that have that social currency.
Yeah.
You don't get a chance to really explore that well until it goes on for some time. And even, so like when you, like Bedlam Hall is
Right.
one, right? Where you have like the secrets and the prestige and the back and forth. And, you know, it's kind of designed where people come and go as they're dismissed from the house. But then you can pick up a new character quickly and go, which is, you know, one of the boons of Powered by the Apocalypse systems is it's so easy to jump in with a new character. But it reminds me of like a TV show, right? Where like everything is contained in this one shot sort of singular episode, but those relationships develop over time. And that one particularly just makes me think of, you know, the old British comedy, Are You Being Served?
Yeah.
Where they're at the department store.
Right.
Because, you know, in that they're also kind of like they're the help, basically.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, but there's all these intertangled like relationships that develop.
You know, you really could turn that, like, make a hack of that and make it into Are You Being Served? You know what I mean? Like, you
Well, I
have
don't
like
know that I would want to, but I just, you know, I like the idea of that kind of flavor added into the sort of horror house
right. Yeah.
setting, right? Like, what if you had the first episode of American Horror Story smashed together with Are You Being Served? Like, that would be really fantastic.
Right. It's one of those things where when you look at the game, you don't really see that it's how it's going to come to life. Like, it's one of those moments where it's just this +1 and you have these strings, or you have these, you know, these regards in the case of Night Witches, right? And I really began to realize it's such a small mechanism in terms of like mechanics and what the game is, but it changes things so very much. And
I think it's so there's not a lot of real estate on a Powered by the Apocalypse game or in the book. So the fact that it's there at all
should say something. Yeah,
should say something. But also, it kind of takes it from being a game that you're running for us to being our game.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it that way, but yeah, you're kind of right. Like, I'm kind of like guiding things, but, you know, it's really more...
Yeah, we each have our own motivations and goals. And
well, I think that really comes to life after the initial couple sessions for PBTA stuff, because obviously when you first sit down, it's the, you know, the MC or whatever the, you know, game you're playing is, it's their job to sort of get the ball rolling and set things in motion, right? But then once those initial threads have kind of gone on for a little while, then it's really more about the players and sort of what they're bringing to the table. And I don't know if it's because we're recording it or if it's just because I like the game that much, you know, or if it's a combination of things, sort of, because like, we're always more on point because we're really focused on playing. So because we have the mics on, right? And it just changes. The development has been different. And I think your point about how, like, on the character sheet, there's not a lot of real estate, and if they've written it down on the character sheet, it's probably an important part of it, right? So regard is on there, and strings in the case of Monster Hearts or whatever. It's such a small thing, but because it's on the character sheet and you write it down and you write, I have, I respect Gallia the most, or whatever it is that you write in there, or I loathe Sveta, or whatever it is.
Well, it's interesting because it has a mechanical effect, but it also gives me a continuous prompt for how I should be role-playing my interactions with that person.
Well, it's like this thing, like, when you sign your name to something, it means more, like you write it down, so you're like sort of like speaking it to truth. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think it's this kind of cool thing where all of that sort of comes together. But that's those come from those moments where you said, just like what you said, where now it's becoming your game and you're telling the story as opposed to sort of me telling the story. Now it's the four of you telling a story, and I'm sort of bouncing ideas back and forth off of you and sort of like kind of shepherding you and guiding you through what, like what's happening or whatever, as like a mediator. I don't know. It just really had this kind of cool moment of realization of just what those games are as they kind of grow their own legs and are like really up and running in the way that like a D&D campaign can get up and going,
Well, and I like that the player defines the nature of that social relationship. So if it was just purely social currency, then it would still very much be in the hands of the GM as, how that dialogue gets interpreted, and then it's just like a spin for things. But when it's the player defining the relationship, then, I have more agency as a player in how interaction with that character goes moving forward. Because regardless of how the conversation happened, exactly what was said, it's my interpretation of those events that matters, not yours.
Right. So I don't know. I don't know there's a whole lot more to say about it. Just really cool. And I feel like there's this perception that you get at a lot of conventions and stuff that PBTA games are their strong point is that they're great for one-shots, which they are. But I really feel like their true strength and kind of hidden strength is that sort of midterm game when you're getting to 7 and 10 sessions that things have really sort of grown and started to spiral out of control. And there's all this disaster and drama and trouble and mayhem happening, sometimes on the surface, sometimes below the surface, and it's, I don't know, it just really shines. And it's just something that sort of, I really realized after our last Night Witches session. So,
so my next thing that I wanted to talk about was Winterhorn. Uh-huh. So we mentioned this in the last thing when we were doing the Gen Con review and how easy it was to throw down and basically what the game is, but just to recap. So it's a game by Jason Morningstar, and you're playing investigators from different departments who are in charge of breaking up this activist group called Winterhorn. Mm-hmm. And you're doing that through kind of classic, intelligence agency sort of interventions like... I can't think of the technical
counterintelligence stuff, like blackmailing,
like spreading rumors about them, doing things to break up the relationships of the group, right? And all the way up from that to physical violence, smear campaigns, all the way up to raids and things of that nature. So I was just thinking, though, when we got done playing that, how cool it would be because we did the deluxe edition, right? And so you have this folder that has like briefing reports and information that's collected, copies of pamphlets that are circulated by the Winterhorn group, and then the core game itself comes with playing cards. And each member of the Winterhorn group, there's a series of pictures, and so you can kind of choose who's who, and there's little background information about each member of the group. And I thought, how cool would it be as a GM? I already have all of this information if I ran a game where you guys played the people within Winterhorn. And it's already basically set up with like things that I can drop and complications I can drop on your group based on intelligence interventions that are happening.
Right.
Or you could do vice versa. You could, the players could be members of the intelligence group and you're investigating Winterhorn, and I have all this information, but I like it the other way better.
Yeah.
Because it feels a little more adversarial,
I definitely agree.
But yeah, so I like it anytime I buy something where I can use it in another way too.
Yeah, so like repurpose it and it gets more mileage out of it. Yeah.
So it's basically set up to be the perfect campaign setting for your next like investigative RPG.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then it could be cool too, because you could even go in sort of a Cthulhu way, and then like if you want to do something sort of like mythosy, right? So the people that were being investigated are now the player characters, right? And they're sort of their little cell is somehow involved in like preventing mythos stuff from happening, right? And then they have this mundane intelligence agency coming down on them and trying to sort of smash them and put them out of business and discredit them. And so, like, how do you deal with that? I think it has some cool potential in a lot of different genres, because you can go just regular straight up horror spy kind of thing.
Or like a Connex kind of thing as well. It could be fun, Yeah,
I agree. It's kind of an interesting way to take it, just, to, in that microscope
could
way.
Make an interesting Orpheus thing as well.
Oh, yeah. Because we talk about, like, repurposing microscope as like a session 0 thing, and this is kind of the same way, because then you have, like, little bullet points of background information on the different characters, if you that they would be playing or whatever. So like their history or whatever. Right on.
Well, and you have those sort of social interaction things as well, because it's kind of built up where, this is the leader of Winterhorn and they had a previous relationship with this person and now they're, involved in a sexual relationship with this person. And so some of that is already built in there, which kind of makes it easier to get it just hit the ground running with it.
Right. All kinds of, the tangled web we weave, with all this, relationships and especially in interorganizational stuff, who's in charge, who wants to be in charge, who's really in charge.
Some of the vices are already there for you to be set up with, to role play with, and to pull on.
Right on. So my next thing is to sort of geek out about is kind of encompasses a lot of things, right? So we're going to kind of take a wandering way through this. So there's a show on Netflix called Babylon Berlin, and it's a show that's about the Weimar Republic in Germany in the interwar period. Like, I think it takes place in like the mid-1920s, I think. And it's filmed really well, and the sets are amazing. It's got really high production value. The acting in it is really good. I will warn you, if you haven't watched it yet and you want to watch it, the dubbing in English is terrible. So I would,
it's awful.
I would
give that show 1 star if I had to watch it. The English dubbing is awful.
So I would recommend that anyone, if you're going to watch it with the English, with the subtitles and with the native speakers speaking in German. And it's really, really good, and it does a really good job of sort of capturing the sort of mystique of the Weimar era, with like how crazy things are in Berlin and how Berlin is sort of like its own monster. It's not really representative of like German culture at large.
I had no idea about all of the communist Russia conflict within Berlin. Like, no clue that was a thing.
Yeah, so there's so many Russians and communists. Like, there's specific districts that are loaded with communists and stuff like that.
And there's like the Stalin supporters versus the
Trotskyists,
anti-Stalin folks.
So it does a really good job of painting this picture of what Berlin was in that time period. It's really, really interesting. And it's a really brief period as well, and there's just a lot of mayhem that happens. And it's interesting because they say that there's anything that you want, anything you can buy, literally anything you want in Berlin in this time period. So it's like this sort of libertine kind of craziness that happens. There's a lot of what do you call it? They're very sexually liberal there. So whether that's, how they deal with, gay or lesbian people or bi people, it's very wide open in the time period, which is kind of interesting because it's pretty far back. It's in the 20s. And drugs everywhere, sex everywhere, all this craziness.
The trans community, too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's, kind of surprising because you sort of picture the early 1900s as being very
very
oppressed.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why I think it's so neat. It's like this weird microcosm of just, whatever, no one cares, it's all good. We're doing our own thing. And part of that, I think, comes from the disaster and the defeat of World War I. And I feel like people had dealt with so much death.
Come home and live again.
Yeah. Like you wanted to come home and live life and have a good time and enjoy yourself, because there were a lot of people that really thought it was the end of the world. And then Spanish flu happens, and there's millions and millions of people that die from that worldwide. So there's this really interesting time period that happens there. So, the show itself is actually a police procedural, but it captures sort of like the mystique, and it's not exactly what it is. It's more like a sort of like a mythologized Weimar or Berlin, but it's what those shows all are, right? So, but it captures that feel really well. And I find that period really interesting, which leads me to the book that I mentioned in our Gen Con wrap up was the Call of Cthulhu Berlin the Wicked City book. And I'm going to run a Yellow King Hastur version of Berlin, where there's no Cthulhu, it's just Hastur. He's the sort of the elder god. There's no Cthulhu mythos. It's the Hastur mythos, and he's the only one that matters.
Can we use the flowchart to pick a creature? Just because that's the only other thing I wanted to talk about, because I think it's so fun.
Can I finish a thought though real quick?
No.
So, I guess my thing is that Call of Cthulhu is really awesome, and Cthulhu is really interesting, and it's cool, and it's big, and Lovecraft, right? But I really love Hastur, and I really love the idea of Hastur, and I like the idea of ideas as a virus, and how like they infect people and how that changes everything, right? It's sort of like this really sort of subtle and insidious monster, right?
Well, I'm like, this is an era in Berlin, like where the political culture is full of zealots.
Yeah.
On
all sides.
All sides. You know, democratic zealots, fascist zealots, communist zealots, like all branches
it's a disaster.
are represented.
Right.
And then on top of that, you have this mental health thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, with, you know, the anxiety and just the broken minds of all kinds of soldiers who come back from World War One, and the terrible way that they're treated because of that. Like that just man up mentality. Like, you know, you're here. I don't see what the problem is. Why can't you just suck it up or just go and die?
Right.
That's basically what, and like, what a great world for that kind of villain to step into.
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing about it is it's just such a different take on it because
and drug addiction.
Yeah.
I can't leave
morphine,
that out.
Loads of morphine, loads of cocaine, right? But like Cthulhu I think is cool, but a lot of the elder gods just feel like a giant sledgehammer to me. You know, it's like, hey, we're going to do this ritual and this giant thing is going to come tearing through into our world and it's going to devour everything and destroy everything, right? But I like Hastur because it's a little more subtle than that. It's like, hey...
You could imagine this being a place where the Robert W. Chambers death chamber gets set up. Like, it's totally believable. It's reasonable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's just so interesting and such a different take on things. And I think... one of the things that I like with Lovecraftian horror stuff, right, is that cosmic terror, right? But one of the things that I don't like about it is that I kind of find the evil that exists in mankind very intriguing, right? And I feel like if there's this entity like Hastur that can sort of put these, you know, just like find the little bit of where your ideas start to sort of like unravel a little bit and just push it just a little bit, right? And then things just go crazy. And you're talking about like regular people doing terrible stuff, which I feel like is sort of the meme of Hastur. And I just think it's really, really cool and so much more subtle. Do you know what I mean? And like sort of relatable in a terrifying kind of a way.
But also kind of comforting, right? because then you could blame all the terrible things that humanity has done on Hastur. Like, oh, that wasn't us. That was the Tattered King. I didn't really have a choice.
Well, that's the thing. Like, the one thing to mention is that if I feel like when you're running games in these time periods, like whether it's involving like Nazis or any other kind of like truly terrible regime, is that I feel like you need to make sure that the evil comes from the people. Like the responsibility isn't shifted onto Cthulhu or Hastur, right? The people are still the ones responsible for doing these terrible things. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It may be that this elder god is the straw that broke the camel's back, but it's still just people being terrible, right? You know,
like I didn't give you that idea. I just fed it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's exactly it, right? I just sort of nursed this terrible feeling or whatever it is that you have inside you, and now look where we're at, right? So I guess my question is, and this is probably going to develop into something much larger, but I've got more reading and some things to figure out before I get there. If you were to put your finger on maybe a couple things that you think would be different between a universe where there is no Cthulhu or Nyarlathotep or Azathoth or any of that kind of stuff, right? Or Shub-Niggurath, but it's only Hastur. How do you think that would change things in sort of a mythosy way? Do you know what I'm saying? Like the real world may not change at all, right? Mm-hmm. Because in Lovecraft, like the real world just exists and people keep churning on in like a World of Darkness kind of way, right? But in terms of like the cultists and the way the investigators, the things that they have to deal with, do you think like what would you envision the differences might be?
So less with, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Hastur's very much like stepping into your world. Right?
Right.
There's not as much oh, I accidentally stumbled into this other place.
Right, yeah. There's some mention of like some people that sort of stumble into Carcosa or whatever, but it's mostly like people coming across his ideas and then him sort of like seeping into the world through those ideas.
Right. So there, to me, it's less fantastical.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like it's much more realism and much less fantasy, if that makes sense. Do you
No, I definitely
mean?
do. So do you see that as being like there's
Like
less?
it's less like I fell down the rabbit hole and more like, just dark terribleness here.
So do you see it as being like less sort of like ritual cultists trying to do some kind of crazy conjuring and more like...
I'm not saying that I don't think there would be ritual cultists. It's just, so like the idea of magic
Right.
in and of itself is not real to this world. So, okay, hold on. Let me just trying to think of a good, relatable kind of example that I could to make what my brain is thinking make sense.
Okay, let me try this a different way. Okay. In some of the stories by Chambers, one of them, they find the play, The King in Yellow, right? Mm-hmm. And so they read the play or they go see the play and people lose their mind and go crazy. And that's sort of how they get introduced to Hastur and all this kind of stuff and how people see the yellow sign. So in my example before with the people summoning and casting like this giant ritual summoning thing, right? I feel like there's less of that and more like, and like less like, I'm going to read the Necronomicon, right? Because like this is just a play that contains this mind-breaking idea, right?
Right.
So it's almost like there's less importance on like super intellectual researchers and anyone can stumble into this disaster. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess to me, and I don't know if this is necessarily going to work, but so when you're looking at science fiction, right?
Right.
You have 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Uh-huh.
And then you have Star Wars.
Okay.
The rest of the Cthulhu mythos is like Star Wars.
Oh, whoa.
And Hastur is like
2000.
the Space Odyssey.
He's Hal.
Like, there is so much fantasy wrapped up in the science fiction of Star Wars. There's magic and there's things that just are not remotely close to real. You know what I mean? It feels less real. And then over here you have, the grim, realistic science fiction versus fantastical science fiction.
No, I think that's a perfect example of it. I never thought of it in those kind of terms. It's a really, really good analogy between Star Wars and 2001. That's really, really solid. That's a really good way to sort of like something that you can put your finger on and like, this
science
is it.
fiction is one where you see that split so clearly, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have your very realistic science fiction, and then you have your far out, really fantastical science fiction.
Right, and both of them can be terrifying because if you think of like Ex Machina, that is very relatable, very real, very, but still very science fiction, and absolutely mortifying, when you follow that thought process out in the same way 2001 is.
It's to me, it's scarier because it is more real.
Right. More real. That's an interesting way to look at it. See, that's why I wanted to ask this, because and I think
I don't know how to.
No, articulating
I don't know how
hard.
to say that as a Cthulhu thing.
Right. Well, let's see. It's like once I get through some of these books and done reading and rereading the annotated King in Yellow, that's from Atlas Games and is really, really awesome and pretty. I want to do a whole sort of episode on this, so I don't want to focus on it too much. But I was kind of curious to get some initial ideas for where to start from because I was really kind of struggling.
Maybe that's it. Is to say that, like when you talk about Fae and those sorts of things, it's that those things are designed to be beyond mortal understanding,
right?
And Hastur is not. Like, he is almost like the most mortal kind of understanding. Like, he is messing with those norms, and turning up things that are human but bad.
Right.
To this umpteenth level.
It's interesting because he's understandable, but at the same time he's not. He's both.
Right, like him in and of himself is still beyond.
Yeah, beyond comprehension.
Beyond comprehension, but
the initial idea isn't.
Right.
So like a little dab is not bad, but the whole thing is too much.
Well, it's terrible, but
right. A little dab will do you.
It's so much worse.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great. I don't want to dwell on it too much because it's going to develop into once I get closer to actually putting this game together, I want to sort of do a whole episode on it because there's loads of things out there about Cthulhu and the larger Cthulhu mythos, right? But Hastur is sort of like this small little niche of it that doesn't get as much popularity, but I think is really, really interesting and intriguing. So just to put a bug in your ear about it, my concept for my game is that which everyone will know, is that Berlin exists, right? And there's all this crazy stuff happening in Berlin in the Weimar time, is that Hastur's ultimate goal is to bring Carcosa into Berlin. Like, and merge the two together, right? Mm-hmm. And then spill out into the world and Yellow Sign and Mayhem and Trouble and everything else. And then that's the sort of premise of the game and sort of where it goes from there. I have no idea, but that's sort of like the idea of it. And like, that's like the 1,000 foot view of the game. So you guys probably are never going to interact with, directly with Hastur, obviously, but that's sort of like what is going to be happening. So, and all the players will know it like at a meta level out of character. That's sort of like the premise of the game. So right on. Cool. I don't know. I was curious to see what you thought as to how that would go. Cause it's a weird thing to think cause you get so caught up in the baggage of all the Cthulhu stuff that you don't almost know where to go, where like, how do you cut 3/4 of the universe off and see how it looks with just this one small piece of it? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of a weird thing to do with it. So I don't know. I'm just kind of curious to see what you thought. So your flowchart. I'm sorry.
So the flowchart
kind of derailed things pretty bad there.
Hastur, does he come with like minions, or is it just Hastur?
There are
like what comes across from Carcosa. Would this be on the Dreamlands chart or on the hold on one moment, or Monsters of the Mythos?
It might be Monsters of the Mythos, but he may not even be the creature. I can't think of what it's called. It's in the there's a free RPG Day product that came out from Pelgrane that is for the Yellow King role-playing game. Came out this year, and there's a creature in there that's got one horn that gets mistaken for a devil. Oftentimes it's in there, but I can't think what it's called.
Okay, well, the reason that we're talking about this is because at Gen Con I got the Sandy Peterson's Field Guide to Lovecraftian Horrors, and I really just bought it because the art was pretty and it had all of these like Lovecraftian monsters that are really awesome. Well, we took it back to the hotel room and come to find out there was a flowchart. So then we spent like 15 minutes basically playing the 20 questions game of Cthulhu creatures.
Right. Does it have wings? Does it have...
We will start with the identifying monsters of the mythos.
Right on.
James, is it invisible? Yes or no?
So, first off, to say that I would initially just say we should do Hound of Tindalos because they are amazing. But if I remember correctly from our playing with it last time, you get there really fast. Because Hounds of Tindalos are amazing and terrifying and just awesome. So, is it invisible? No.
Okay. So we're going to go to question 3. Does it have a shape?
Yes.
Is it worm-like in shape?
No.
Does it have a head?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Does it have wings?
No.
Is the thing's body conical and legless? Or non-conical and generally with legs?
Conical and legless.
It is the Great Race of Yes.
Yes, that is it.
Yeah. And so then it gives you the page number for said creature.
Right.
Page 38. We see the wonderful, the fantastic.
The Great Race, the Great Yace of Rift. Well, it's a really...
And then it gives you a quote, tells you about the habitat, like the habits of the creature.
Most importantly, amazing artwork.
Wonderful art.
Yeah. So. Well, I think it's I don't know that... So, to be fair... I don't have a lot of Call of Cthulhu books because I'm not the biggest fan of BRP. I've always loved Cthulhu. I love Cthulhu-style games, but I'm just not a big fan of the mechanics of Call of Cthulhu right now. I've played loads of it. It's just I didn't invest in it myself, right? So I don't know if this flowchart is the first of its kind in terms of Call of Cthulhu stuff, but it is wicked cool. So so awesome. And I think it's a cool resource for players too. Like, maybe you could give the players like part of that flowchart. Like they find a dead investigator or a crazy investigator's notes, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have like, does it have this? Yes or no? And then so you have no, and there's just an arrow going to like, I don't know. You're like, what is? So
I like the idea of finding a mundane person that knows nothing about the occult, but like maybe they're like like someone who does autopsies, right? So it's very like Men in Black.
Right.
So it's like this lady that just keeps stumbling across weird things, and she's been keeping decades of notes. Like, I don't know what this creature is, but the wound appears to be caused by some kind of giant sucker tentacle. I don't know.
Right. I think that's would be an amazing product. Probably like sort of like did that out like handwritten. Do you know what I mean? And like made some rough sketches of the monster creatures and stuff and whatever. Like it's just really fun. It's a really cool thing to do. And I guess in a way to be like, all right, think of a weird monster. Like, like you said, 20 questions and going through and trying to figure out what it is.
It's just 20 questions of Lovecraft.
so
awesome.
Way fun.
It's a game in and of itself.
It's a game within a game.
Like, okay, go ahead and think of a Cthulhu Mythos creature, and I'm going to guess what it is.
Alrighty, right on. Do we have anything else to geek out about, or should we wrap this one up here?
That is everything that I had.
Right on. So real quick, before we close this one out, I do have a quick question for you. So you just started watching Babylon Berlin. I think we're on halfway through season 2.
I don't think we're on like episode 2.
Well, there's only 5 episodes in season 2. Or 4 or 5.
Well, on Netflix, it's packaged all of season 2 and 3 are wrapped into singular season 2.
Yeah,
but.
yeah. I know, like you've talked about before, how you're just not into history, generally speaking, don't know hardly anything about the time period. Or what do you think about the show? Like, do you feel like it's a good introduction to that kind of world, specifically that time period and that place?
Yeah, I definitely. Okay, so I don't like history, but it's because when people teach history, they remove all of the people from it. They remove all of the personality from it, and it's boring. People are what make history interesting. They're what make life interesting.
Right.
So probably like a dramatization of a historical period is probably the best way for me to learn about history, because it's the only way that I'm going to care to watch it. Like if you give me some kind of like History Channel documentary, I will be like either asleep or like in the other room cleaning something within 10 minutes of the introduction of the show.
Right. Well, I think it's like that show is a great way where in terms of like an RPG, really you're not looking for specific exact details. It's like you're more trying to capture the feel of the world in that time period and the themes and the sort of like what's going on and the feel of the places or whatever. And like big broad stroke highlights of what's happening. Like, so like they have several scenes that are in the cabaret, and they have several scenes that involve like communist demonstrations and all this kind of stuff happening in the streets, right? So like I feel like it's a perfect blend of like getting across the feel of what's happening in the world and still showing like how it affects like the everyday life of these people and people being shot during the demonstrations and all this kind of stuff and whatever,
And like the dramatization makes it relatable.
Yeah.
Right? Because human emotion and human interactions have not really changed significantly in the last 100 years. Like the events may be different, but people are people. Right. So like I understand this interaction, I understand these motivations, and here's this historical backdrop that I wasn't familiar with.
Right.
So
I was just curious to see what you thought about it, and like in I know you enjoyed the show, but more in terms of like bringing it over as like a way to sort of get the feel of a time period to play a game in. Do you know what I'm saying?
And I like that it's like the cop investigative drama too, because I am like the science geek of the spectrum.
Right.
So I like all of the like nods to forensic stuff that's happening.
The procedurals.
Where they're at with, analyzing ballistics and things like that. You're like, interesting. And like what kind of drugs they're giving for things.
Right.
And how they're describing, basically like this PTSD panic attack disorder, and people are like, that's nonsense.
Right. They're traitors. They just couldn't hold the line. Yeah.
You're like, what?
There's a great moment with all these psychiatrists and physicians when he's given this talk, and you're just like, wow, but yeah.
Rough.
Well, I think it's interesting.
He's talking about cognitive behavioral therapies, basically, and they're like, this is a racket.
Yeah.
Drill a hole in his head, right? Like, oh my God.
Right. Like, it's just interesting because it does a good job of sort of like touching on all the things that are really exploding in that time period, and I don't know, I don't want to like get caught up in the weeds of it, which I think we may already have been, but like, it's just a great way to sort of develop more of an understanding and like an emotional connection to the time period, because like if you're going to run a game, you need to know like some specifics maybe about what's happening, but you need to sort of like with any game, you need to get that investment, and that investment generally comes through some kind of emotional attachment or emotional involvement. And if you can see these things happening in a show that's good and well produced and well acted and that kind of stuff, then it makes it easier to do that, I guess, is all I was trying to get at. So
yeah. Yeah, it would be a good way to get your players to be excited about playing a game in this setting.
Right on.
For sure.
All right, so I think we will wrap this sort of gaming, what do we call these? Roundtable?
Roundtable.
Roundtable. Right on. I think we'll wrap this one up here. So, quick plug for All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 369. Willie gives this a 5.5 on the Willie grading scale. This week, Peter G., a.k.a. Sailor Portland, joins the show to share the latest rumors from the set of Doctor Who. Meanwhile, Chris has the details about The Boys beating Amazon's projections. Willie describes the latest shadiness to come out of MoviePass, and Anthony gives us the background on Disney's plan to disrupt Netflix. So you can check out that episode of All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 369. Willie gives the a 5.5 on the Willie grading scale. That's a mouthful. If you like what we do here at Just More Fix, you can support us at patreon.com/JustMoreFix and join all the other awesome Patreons like Timothy Barra, Hector Treelane, Tiziano Furlano, Alistair H., Simon McNair, Alan White, and the OG Toddles, and get access to all of our raw audio feeds and pre-shows, as well as our quarterly zine in PDF or print form, depending on what level you support at. As always, really appreciate all the support you guys have for us, both through Patreon or through sharing us on social media or any way that it is that you guys support us. And just a big thank you from us, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at Incompetech.com. You can support us at Patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix or follow us on Twitter at Just One More Fix.